Hey friends, and welcome back to Alignment with Rebecca. We're here playing in the sandbox. I use that phrase a lot, mostly because I really think we are, as humans, playing in a really big, huge mother sandbox in which we're trying to figure out how to live well, how to have the good life, to live the good life, and to figure it out for each of ourselves individually. We've been talking this week about propaganda, and today I'm going to talk about how propaganda functions, some of the main things that we see happening in propaganda models, and why am I talking about propaganda? You must hate the Republicans. No, I actually don't. I don't hate the Republicans. I don't hate the Democrats. I don't even hate advertising, but we are bombarded with propaganda as American citizens. And I would even argue the world is bombarded by propaganda in general. It's been around since the moment we figured out we could influence somebody, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. There's very little we can often do about propaganda, but one thing we can do about it is to figure out how it works, why it works, and then make our own conscious choices about whether or not we're going to go along with the river or if we're going to decide to pass on that particular boat. So it's just good to understand how it functions and why it functions, and also to be aware that it is functioning all the time in our worlds. We are constantly in the realm of propaganda because advertising is a form of propaganda. And you might say, oh, I can turn that stuff off, but you can't. You can't. Our brains literally become rewired by the things we experience, by the things we hear, and those things that we are saturated with, because we are malleable beings. We're almost like clay, and it's amazing. There's lots of wonderful studies. I'm going to be talking about a few today that have looked at how our brains adopt to things like propaganda, to things like lies, and so on and so forth. So again, kind of recapping from yesterday, propaganda is a form of communication that is used mostly to influence an audience and to further a particular agenda, whether it's selling a product or voting for a particular political party or something like that. And oftentimes the information given to us is not objective. There may be some facts hidden in there, that's really important, but they're selective facts. So they're not giving us the whole picture. They're usually put into a nice little narrative or storytelling experience, and it's all created to get us to believe a certain particular point of view. And that's propaganda. And the reason I like this definition, and it comes from Wikipedia, is that it's general. Most of the time, again, when we look at Webster's dictionary, you're going to see that propaganda is mostly discussed in the realm of politics. And of course, that's where we are most concerned with often. But the techniques used in propaganda can be found in a whole array of different types of categories. In politics, advertising, when we discuss class distinctions, religious distinctions, race distinctions, gender distinctions, sexuality, and the list goes on and on and on. I would even argue that we are raised with propaganda from our parents because they want us to become certain types of individuals. They want us to follow certain values. And when we're young, because we're not going to understand the logic, oftentimes propaganda-like techniques are used on children. And I know there's a lot of parents out there saying, I don't do it. But if you tell your children about mythological beings who might surprise them in the middle of the night, if they're good, you're using propaganda techniques. Now, that means that propaganda isn't always bad. How's that for an idea? I'm just throwing it out there. It's not bad, it's not good. It just is. Just like many things else in our world, it functions in a certain way, and it can be used for good, and it can be used for bad, or it could be used unknowingly We often use propaganda techniques unknowingly. You're writing a paper for school and you really want the teacher to feel that you have made a good point, you have argued your point well, and you leave out a few facts that you know are going to work against you just a little bit, right? That's a form of propaganda. So it's important to understand how and why we do these things so that we can make better conscious decisions about choosing not to do them or choosing very specifically why we are doing them. We should never allow language, ethics, emotions, all of these things to lead us. We have to make the conscious choice to be behind the driver's seat at all times. And this is hard. As we talked about many, many times, our body is not necessarily wired for this. Our body looks for shortcuts because to consciously be aware of everything that's going on takes a ton of energy. And so what we end up doing is we allow our body to make some decisions for us. And again, this isn't necessarily bad. It certainly was part of our survival needs, our survival techniques. And when we are in a fight or flight situation, and we want to be able to take those shortcuts. We want our body to know, run now. Don't look back. Get the hell out. Don't be a bad horror movie and go to that door where you know there's a bad person with some kind of axe or something that's going to kill you. You want to be able to say, hey, I'm not going to let my fear overtake me and make me stupid. I'm going to decide cognitively the best way to handle any situation in life. And that's why I call this alignment with Rebecca. It's really about how we can find our way into the world in a very, very specific and conscious way. I'm not talking about control freaks. I'm just talking about being aware. So with propaganda, we mostly respond to that in an unaware state. And because we are saturated with propaganda, especially in the realm of advertising, we are normally not conscious about it because it becomes embedded in our being. We get used to it, right? I mean, if you get used to something, you tend not to notice it anymore. It becomes a habit. It becomes so ingrained in who we are that we just stop being conscious of it. It's like saying, I love you to somebody you love, but just automatically saying it without having a good motive behind that automated kind of response. Yes, I love you too. Yeah, I love you too. Yeah, have a good day, right? And becomes habit. So the trick is to be able to look at these processes and to figure out, okay, why do I do that? And how do I do that? Propaganda is particularly interesting because it mixes fact with fiction. And this is a really important point that I need to make. A lot of times, the reason people fall for propaganda is there is enough factual information in the propaganda in order to get us to maybe go, maybe I need to listen to this a little bit closer because I do remember hearing about that fact. Propaganda will rely on very generalized ideas such as such and such happened at 8:25 p.m. Mountain Time in Utah. So that's a fact. We have a date, a time, and an event. And we also may have a fact with statistics, right? 35,000 people fall victim to this every day. So these are different techniques in which we are throwing out facts. Numbers are always impressive, whether they're a date or a statistic or whatever it is, because the bigger the number, the more truth we believe is behind the statement that follows the number. So what our brains do is our brains focuses on the number, and we don't necessarily focus on maybe the mispresentation of events that follow the number. So numbers are really important facts that we often find in propaganda. So like with advertising, 75,000 people can't be wrong. Wrong about what? But we're impressed by the 75,000 people or whatever happens to be that number. Of course, it's going to go up into the millions today. So Having a fact embedded in the misrepresentation of information is extremely important, because those little facts, even if they aren't detailed, even if they are entirely accurately presented within the context of whatever the person is talking about, they impress us. And our minds go, oh, that's a number. Oh, that's a fact. Oh, I've heard that before in this news broadcast, and I really respect this news broadcast. So, all of these things are happening in our brain when we are being exposed to advertising, to political propaganda, or social arguments, political arguments, economic arguments, buying a house. All of these things are present. And it's important to just be able to recognize the red flag. If somebody's putting a lot of numbers out at you, and these are the facts that they are presenting, that should immediately give you a red flag to pay really specific attention to the other details that are going to follow. Super important, because oftentimes those details may not be represented entirely, or really important, what is not being said? What is being left out? And that's probably one of the most important things about propaganda, is there are things being left out, and you or me, us, we, them, all of us, we're not paying attention to what is being left out of the conversation. And that is vital, because when we leave things unsaid, that is a form of miscommunication, and usually an intentional form of miscommunication. So if you are a student and you're writing a paper and you find this fact that really goes against your argument, and you just decide to leave it unsaid, you are offering a misrepresentation of the topic itself. And of course, this is then utilized in a more powerful way when we're looking at propaganda. So I want to talk about a really interesting propaganda technique that has been discussed recently ever since the Russian interference with our elections. And the RAND Corporation put out this great article, and I highly suggest that you read it. It's called The Russian Fire Hose of Falsehood Propaganda Model. And this propaganda model is not necessarily new or unique, but has been aided by the onset of the internet. So when we look at the falsehood of the false hose of propaganda model, there are a couple things that we see happen a lot, and you'll notice that this has been happening a lot online. First of all, propaganda messages are sent high volume and multi-channeled. Again, I'm not just talking politics, I'm talking the whole realm, right? So if you are being targeted for certain ads because Google, Facebook, Yahoo, Bing, or whoever, all these algorithms that are out there that are gathering all this information about you, they're finding out who you are, what you like to buy, the sites you like to visit, the people you like to talk to, and they gather that information in a somewhat anonymous way. You're probably associated with a number or something. But then you'll find that, you just did this search on Amazon for unicorn for your child, and now you're on Facebook, and all of a sudden there's all these unicorn ads, and now you go check your email on Gmail, and there's all these ads for unicorns, and then you go to this website, let's say something totally unrelated, such as a website for, I can't think of anything. You go to my website, and let's say I had advertising on my website, you would probably see an advertisement there specifically for unicorns. So that's high volume and multi-channeled. You're getting it from all different directions, and you're getting it all the time. And this is a form of propaganda. Now, of course, we also can see this with the Russian interference. You would have these specialized groups that were made to target people with certain interests on different forms of social media. And then every time they went onto a social media site, they were bombarded with the same message. We see this with bots. Bots, the algorithm type of technology that puts out content or information on different social media sites, these bots have the ability to push out information every single second, just even faster, to boom, 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 boom. And then we end up being saturated with that content, and that influences us. So that would also go with the second main model of the propaganda, which is rapid, continuous, and repetitive information. Repetitive information is normal. You can see this in propaganda techniques all the way back to the ancient Greeks, right? We have repetitive messages being sent over and over again, even if they are falsehoods, even if they are lies. But the more we are exposed to them as human beings, because again, we are emotional creatures with the capacity to reason, not the other way around, they impact us, and they literally rewire our brains. They literally rewire our brains. So the more we hear a message, the more we start to believe that message, even if in the beginning we thought that message was a lie. We're going to start to believe it, because that's partly how we function. It's also part of our survival techniques and our ability to build communities and things. There's a lot of positives to this, but there's also, of course, a lot of room to do damage with this type of information as well. What is kind of new is that there is a real massive commitment now to dismissing objective reality. Because we understand through our sciences how malleable human beings are, if we can misrepresent reality, whether we're selling a product or we are a candidate trying to get into office, we are going to be able to create confusion. Confusion allows people not to feel comfortable about any information they are receiving. So if they look up to you, in ancient Greece, you'd call this ethos, right? A character, somebody you believe in, who you believe has authority, right? And this authority is giving you this information. Even if you originally dismiss the information, you're going to look at that authority and you're going to go, my God, this person that I respect so much, they believe this, so it must be true. So once we combine misinformation with ethos or authority, character, somebody we respect, then all of a sudden the misinformation doesn't seem like misinformation anymore, because we respect the person who's giving us that information. So that's another layer. And finally, there is a lack of commitment to consistency. And again, the internet's been very, very helpful with this particular type of technique, because if we are inconsistent with how we're giving the information, we are constantly keeping people off balance. Again, they don't know what to believe. They can't look to the news anymore and go, I believe the news. They can't look to the information they're getting on their podcast. They can't necessarily believe that. But again, they believe this one being where this person that they have a great deal of respect for, and so then that's the person they go to. Even if that person is also spewing or sending out, that is, misinformation. And again, we see this in commercials. We see these techniques in politics. We see these techniques around a campfire at night. We are emotional beings with the ability to reason. And because we are more emotional than we are bodies of absolute reason, it's really easy for us to go into these propaganda techniques. So to finish off this portion of the day, I want you to consider checking out this movie. This is from Nazi Germany, and I just want to make sure I get all the information for you right. Where is it? There we go. Der ewige Jude, 1940, or The Eternal Jew in English. It was a black and white film. It was directed by Fritz Hippler, who joined the Nazi Germany party at the age of 17 and then rose through the ranks to run the film department in the propaganda ministry. And this particular film, I believe you can still see it on YouTube. I used to show it to my students on YouTube. But what's so brilliant about this film, and I'm calling it brilliant in the sense that it is a brilliant piece of propaganda, it is well done, is here's a film that offers facts along with fiction and an entertaining narrative. And as American citizens, what you will notice, probably, especially if you happen to be a film buff, is some of the misconstrued facts that are often are movies that were made in Hollywood at that time about Jewish families struggling. And of course, it also contained a lot of propaganda against Jewish people here in the United States because we had a lot of propaganda against the Jewish people. They're miserly, they're this, they're that. And what Nazi Germany did was to take segments of these movies, these entertainments, and to present them as truths. And what's also interesting about it is you'll see that they show people who are of Jewish descent moving around different parts of Europe. Again, a fact. And we have to remember that for a long time, people did not have the Jewish state. There wasn't a place to land. And because there was such hatred against Jewish people, they would be pushed out from one country to another country. So there was a fact. Lots of traveling, lots of nomadic action, right? But then this particular director associates the rat with the Jewish person. And of course, what does rats bring? They bring disease. So if you make that association, then you're going to convince people that it's not the rats necessarily bringing the disease, it's the Jewish people who bring the rats with them. So take a look at this piece of propaganda, because although by today's standards we'd say, oh my God, that's blatant bullshit, right? But the truth is, if you look at it deeper, you'll see a lot of these techniques being utilized in order to convince the people that another group of people are bad simply because they were born a certain way. And I hear Lady Gaga in the background. Hey, Lady Gaga. Love that woman. She's fantastic. So take a look at that, do a little research, and then for today's meditation, I want us to think about those moments in our lives in which propaganda took hold. It happens to all of us because we're human. It can't be helped. So take a seat. Get comfortable. Someplace that you can sit for the next 8 minutes or so and feel relaxed. And I want you to start out with your breath. We always focus on our breath first because, well, it gives us something solid to send our attention to. It allows us to stop the chatter in our brains and to become the observers of our life, the observers of our bodies, our thoughts. And the more we can become the observer, the better we can make conscious decisions in our life about all sorts of things. Now that you're feeling a little bit more grounded, I want you to focus on bringing your breath in for a count of 5, holding for a count of 1 or 2, and then exhaling for a count of 6 to 7. Really focus on that exhale. The more you can focus on the exhale, the more relaxed you can make your body and your mind. feeling grounded? Maybe a little less frazzled. Now, imagine a moment in your life where you got hoodwinked by propaganda. Maybe you purchased a phone you didn't need. You might have been at a big store and put more stuff into your cart than you really could afford or needed. Maybe there was a politician that really captured your imagination, and then later you became dismayed. It might be an idol, might be a friend, might be somebody you don't know. What was said? What actions were taken? What music was played? What story was being told that convinced you to believe without questioning? Having faith is a beautiful thing. But sometimes having blind faith can be dangerous. Just recount those moments without judgment, without anger, toward the other or toward yourself or toward a product. Just take a few moments to observe what happened and understand from those processes how they impacted you. Now, let go of all those thoughts, the remembrances, and just breathe. Today, I challenge you to try to be aware of yourself and observe yourself as you absorb information from friends, families, strangers, signs on the side of the road, commercials in between your favorite TV show, favorite radio show, YouTube, Facebook, whatever. Just take a moment to observe how you react to the information you are receiving, and then just consciously place that in your toolbox. Practice it. If you do so, you'll start the road of being conscious about your life. And it's a very empowering thing. Thank you all for joining me today. We'll be back tomorrow for our last broadcast this week. I hope that you are happy and joyful. Mahalo. And, as always, namaste.